I'd now like to introduce Ian Prentice, who's Managing Director of Technology Metals Australia.
Thanks to Paydirt for giving us the opportunity to have a chat this morning about technology metals and what we're doing at our project up in the Midwest of Western Australia. So, technology metals for a cleaner future, pretty generic title. What we're going to talk today is about the very exciting opportunity in front of us to develop the world's next large-scale vanadium, primary vanadium project. So we are at the starting gate of actually moving straight into development. So very, very exciting phase for technology metals. We've been at it for a little while, and we're, as I say, very excited about where we're at right now. So why invest in TMT? World-class minerals in a tier 1 jurisdiction, so critical mineral vanadium. We also get a little bit of titanium, a bit of ilmenite concentrate on the side, which as I'll go through and highlight how important that is to us in our current strategy of how we're moving through into implementation of this project. But very, very important minerals for the future that we're moving into. Nationally significant. Part of that future energy solution, we're going to be looking at downstream processing of our vanadium into vanadium electrolyte to support vanadium redox flow batteries here in Australia. So really critical part of our business model and a really strong management team, which we'll touch on. But I guess there's two real key takeaways, I think, and if we can get that through that and out of this 15 minutes or 13 minutes I've got left. Low cost. We're going to be long life, low cost. And I'll show you the cost curve for the vanadium industry later on, and also demonstrate through this presentation why we will still be at the bottom end of that cost curve, even given the environment we're in at the moment with the inflation that we're all experiencing, and environmental approvals. If you don't have environmental approvals, you don't have a project. You do all the hard work on the technicals, but if you don't have those environmental approvals in place, you don't have a project. And I picked up something that Ed mentioned in his presentation, planning for success, planning for the future. So we actually referred our project to the EPA in 2018, so 4 years ago. So we right back then we were going, we're going to build this thing and let's get into that process with the EPA. These are complex processing circuits. There's a complex process to move through with the EPA, and we're right at the finish line of that, as I said in there, the last lap of that process. Corporate overview, we're very fortunate to have completed a significant capital raise late last year to bring RCF on board. So RCF Fund 7 invested in us and is now our largest shareholder, cornerstone shareholder. At the end of last year, we had just under $22 million cash at bank. We've spent a little bit of that, but we're still in a really, really strong position. Been listed for, I guess, since 2016, so coming up to 6 years, but still only 204 million shares on issue. So a really nice capital structure, and as it says there, top 20 own over 50% of the company. Experienced board and management, really critical obviously to moving projects from an idea, exploration through to development. I'll just highlight two new appointees, if you like, on that slide. Jackie Murray, who came on board, RCF's nominee, fantastic addition to the board team who came on last year. And then David English, who's rejoined us as our Chief Operating Officer. David was very heavily involved in our feasibility study that we completed back in 2019 through 20. He's come back at the beginning of this year to get us to implementation and building of this project. So David's got a long history in Western Australia of building projects. He also a history of operating at Windamurra, the only other vanadium project in WA that's actually did get up to the starters line. So really key appointments for us. So what are our advantages for our project? So some of you may have listened to Vince Elgar from Australian Vanadium yesterday in his presentation. We share the same ore body with Vince, but and there's a number of other vanadium projects both here in Australia and globally that are progressing towards development. So why are we going to be the one that actually gets there? Environmental approvals I've already mentioned, so that's really critical to getting a project built. But large high-grade resource, 80-odd million tonnes at 1.1%, part of 140-odd million tonnes at 0.9% total resource. Lowest cost quartile, conventional processing. So salt roast water leach is the conventional vanadium processing route. So we're not going out and doing anything novel in our process. So when you start talking to the financiers, they've got a level of comfort with that. Shallow weathering is our real key to keeping our costs down. too much to go into all the detail now, but come and talk to us at our booth 18, around why that's so important, but that's critical in why we will be one of the lowest cost producers in the world. Titanium byproduct, again, that's going to be a big contributor. Heavily invested in the downstream, looking at downstream into electrolyte, but also looking at other downstream models here in Australia to add value and open up markets for us. And importantly, fully funded all the way through to FID. ESG, clearly very, very important for all of us. I'm just mindful of time, so unfortunately we're going to need to move through a little bit quicker, but it's been a key focus of ours all the way through. So what we do in our environment from an exploration point of view, our engagement with the pastoralists and the local traditional owners, critical to making sure that we have good support for what's going to be a very long-lived project. It's a 25-year project is what we expect from the get-go. So very, very important to build those foundations and a key part of what we do. All about vanadium, critical mineral, application that's developing strongly. I won't spend a lot of time on that. As I said, people who had the pleasure of seeing with Vince yesterday heard a lot more about the batteries. I won't do too much talking about the batteries, but that's certainly where we see a big growth happening in the vanadium sector, vanadium redox flow batteries. But really, really importantly, most vanadium still goes into steel. The more vanadium you use in steel, the less steel you need for that application, therefore the less coal you're burning to make steel, so therefore you're reducing emissions. So Texas A&M University did a life cycle analysis of that and demonstrated in 2019 in China, adding vanadium to their steel reduced their overall industrial emissions by 1.5%. So that's a huge, huge number. So really important mineral as we move forward. But I guess really critically, it needs new supply. Currently, the market's dominated by China. Second to that is Russia. So China's sort of 60-odd% of the market. 15% comes out of Russia, and as we know, thanks to Vlad's activities in Europe, that's under pressure. So the Europeans are really actively looking for other stable, secure supplies from OECD nations. The next biggest producer is South Africa. So you've got this really interesting dynamic in the vanadium market where 75-80% of the supply comes from jurisdictions that may not be top of the list as far as your supply chain. So Australia sits here with the third largest resources of vanadium in the world, no current production. So there's a really massive opportunity. As it shows there, by 2025, the forecast, we're going to need next to 25,000 metric tonnes of vanadium. We plan to produce around 7,000 tonnes, and we plan to be in production by that time, but clearly there's still a lot of production there to come into that market. As I mentioned, I probably won't go too much on this given our time, but vanadium redox flow batteries, large scale, long duration, stationary storage. Very safe, no thermal runaway, very long life, sustainability. The vanadium that goes into these batteries is 100% recyclable at the end of the battery life, so we don't need to try and work out recycling plans for these batteries. We already know that the vanadium can be taken out and reused, so we've got this fantastic sustainability and safety. Life cycle, over the full life cycle of these batteries, they'll last 20 years, if not longer. They're very, very cost competitive, but for a niche solution. Large scale, long duration, linked up with renewable energy sources, these are an ideal solution. And just a bit of a snapshot, this comes out of Vanatech, which is the vanadium industry organisation, but these aren't new. These are developed in the University of New South Wales in the mid-1980s, have been being deployed across the world since that time. Currently there's 146 of these batteries either out there operating, being constructed or under tender. So there's a massive, penetration of this technology that's already happening, and we believe it's going to continue to accelerate and be a significant consumer of vanadium. And then where do we fit? We've got a Japanese partner, LE System, that we're working with to develop our own downstream electrolyte business. Key to really making these vanadium batteries competitive is to make sure you make the electrolyte close to where you deploy the batteries. So our strategy is to make sure we can make electrolyte here in Australia, up and down the eastern seaboard, here in the west, to then help to facilitate the rollout of these large-scale batteries. So we've got the high-purity vanadium in WA. We can turn that into really good electrolyte, and then it can go straight in and help these batteries come through to fruition. So the project itself, we're sitting up in near Meekatharra, the Murchison Technology Metals project. Gabonintha and Yarrabubba are the two separate deposits. Gabonintha is the largest area. We've completed a feasibility study on Gabonintha, on the resource there, came out with this long life, low cost, fantastic metrics. You see there $255 million EBITDA, annual EBITDA at prices that are below current market prices. Importantly, that's where we've got their environmental approval. So they're tracking along really, really well with the EPA. And what we'll do is we'll build the integrated processing facility there at Gabonintha. So all the way from crushing all the way through to delivery of the high purity V2O5 up at Gabonintha. Yarrabubba is the new project that we're adding into the system. We've been working this up over the last couple of years, adds a lot of value. So we made a strategic decision last September to integrate Yarrabubba back into the Gabonintha DFS and consolidate them all into one project. Yarrabubba gives us high-grade feed into the processing circuit, and Yarrabubba, importantly, gives us a titanium product, and that's where we get a real kicker from an economic point of view. We're completing an integration study as we speak. That's going to come out mid-year. That'll update the reserves, update the production profile. It will demonstrate that Yarrabubba is going to be our first source of ore, and it will demonstrate that will then deliver a whole lot of titanium in parallel with a really attractive feed of vanadium pentoxide product. So we believe it's going to really have a big impact on the economics, and we believe that's where our cash operating costs will still be very, very competitive across the full life of that project with those additional products coming on board. I guess just the last point there, I can't go back. No. From the study at Gabonintha, we've completed all the engineering, completed all the detail. What we need to do now is, once we've this integration of consolidating how we're going to approach the mining side and the scheduling side, we then move into an implementation phase. So that's really what's ahead of David and his team right now, is to move from all the detailed engineering into implementation, engaging with vendors, engaging with contractors on how we move very, very quickly from this phase into actually breaking earth and getting the construction underway. Cost quartile, that's 2020 numbers, the latest data, but you can see that we sit very, very competitive down at around $4 a pound. We'd be the third lowest cost producer at those metrics. Now, we'll update those with Yarrabubba being included. We'll bring the titanium into that, and we'll look at where we sit then, but we expect we'll still be very, very competitive at that lowest end of the cost quartile. So the timetable, I've already touched on a lot of this work that we're doing. I guess the key ones are really at the bottom of that chart. So environmental approvals, we believe we're on track to get EPA Part 4 finished by the end of the third quarter, so targeting September for that. And that's really the last piece of the puzzle. That then allows us to make a development decision at board level. Development decision allows us to then place orders on long lead items. All of us involved in developing projects know through COVID, through logistics chains, lead times have blown out significantly. So our strategy is to get ahead of all that and place these orders as quickly as we possibly can. So that's what we're working towards, making a recommendation to the board in the fourth quarter around the development of this project. We'll have the approvals in place. We'll have all of that detailed work around the design and the actual scheduling of the project in place. And we can then say, okay, we're very comfortable to place the orders for those items and then move through to FID from there. Part of all that journey is all the key partners we have along the way. Obviously, the federal government, that's going to be a key part of our funding strategy, engaging with NAIF, engaging with EFA, and engaging with the Critical Mineral Facilitation Office. They're conversations we've been having over the last few years as we move to this final stage. Great engagement with the WA government, lead agency support there. EPA, I've talked about a fair bit about how we've long engagement there. The next two are really important. APA will be providing us gas transportation. So they'll build a pipeline for us to get gas to the site, which enables us to build a fully integrated project at site, so we really reduce our trucking costs of having everything in one spot. And FL Schmidt are the experts, are the leaders in the pyro section, the roasting section of this processing circuit. They installed Largo's process kiln back in 2013-14, so Largo are the most recent new vanadium producer. They put that kiln into place for Largo back in 2013, have been supporting it all the way through. They've done all our test work, they've done our pilot test work, so very, very engaged in the project. So we'll be working with them again through to implementation. Then the last bit is around engagement with customers. Again, very, very important. Probably run out of time to go into too much detail, but we've had really good engagement with customers around offtake and engagement in the project level. And then that's this. Oops, one too many. A bright future is right here. We've got a globally significant project. We've got a fantastic strategic investor on board with RCF. We're in the critical mineral space, which is getting a huge amount of attention and really driving the development of these projects. We're very focused on delivery. We have been since 2016 when we listed, and we're continuing that focus. We have the team in place, and David will argue with me that we continue to build that team, and we will. And we've got a very stable operating environment here in WA. So we are very much set for success, and watch this space over the next 6 months. Thank you very much.